Have you heard of BookTok? It's TikTok's largest community and it's shaping book sales as well as our reading habits. But not everyone is happy about it. I'm Anelise Borges and this is The Stream.
A girl on TikTok was saying that BookTok has ruined the publishing industry.
Do you guys ever wish you could just like let me in?
Do you know something?
Do you know something?
I might know something.
I might know something too. Ugh! Worst song ever.
Reading is among life's most transformative experiences and one that significantly changed through time and thanks to technology. Social media has added to the metamorphosis our reading habits have gone through, more recently with BookTok. It's the space where readers are going to share their opinions about the books they read, as well as their to-be-read piles. But critics say the quality of the content promoted on BookTok can be dubious. Joining me today to discuss are Ashling Sugrue, a writer, comedian, and content creator joining us from Madrid, and Darcy, Theo, the author of The Light That Blinds Us and a content creator on TikTok joining us from London, and Shannon Devito, the senior director of book strategy at American bookseller Barnes & Noble. She's joining us from New York. Thank you all so much for your time today. Ashling, TikTok's latest figures show that there are 240 billion views under the hashtag BookTok. How would you describe this corner of the internet and what happens there?
Well, it's probably my favorite corner of the internet. It's full of people who really love to read and love to share that love with others. It's primarily catering towards people who love romance or romantasy or fantasy or like escapist fiction. And I find that it tends to be younger women, nerdier younger women who maybe don't have that kind of reading circle in their real life and want to find it online.
Nerdier, younger women, but Andy, you're none of that. And your path is fascinating because you almost embody BookTok in a way for me. You started talking about books there, and now you became a writer yourself. Can you talk to us about that? But also, specifically, if you think it was easier for you to get published because of the followers that you already had on TikTok?
I actually wouldn't have had my book deal unless I was on BookTok, because that's how my publishers found me. So initially I started, reading was always a solitary activity, and now we've got a community where we get to discuss our favorite books and book reviews. And it kind of instilled a love for reading back in, which I hadn't had from when I was a young child. So I was reading other books that people were recommending and then starting to talk about a book that I've been writing for over 10 years. As I was doing that, I started to share more and more details about it until eventually one of the big 5 publishers in the world got in contact with me and said, "We like the sound of what you're doing. Can you please send us your manuscript?" And then within 2 weeks, they had made an offer directly to me. So I owe a lot to BookTok for giving me that platform in order to help facilitate that publishing journey, which is very atypical, but I'm very, very grateful for it. And I feel like when authors have some form of a platform, it helps to reassure the publishers that they are going to have guaranteed readers, which of course is a business at the end of the day. So I think that is not essential, but I do think it helps quite a lot, especially on debut authors.
And it's a thin margin business, as Shannon has said, also a competitive business. Shannon, how has BookTok impacted or changed the way you sell books today?
I think it's just opened the doors to a lot more readers and a different, group, as Ashling was saying, of readers who maybe haven't read in a while and have been rediscovering it. BookTok about 4 years ago kind of started expanding, and a lot of our booksellers who kind of run their own shops started creating displays, make it local. And that's the exciting part, is just getting them involved in reading again. I think it has changed publishing, parts of publishing. Followers and engagement are an important kind of marketing piece when you're looking at a book or looking at kind of overall approach. But I think like this conversation, book talk and TikTok can't be everything. There has to be kind of discovery, friends outside, author friends, different approaches. And I think that's the exciting part because, you know, book talk has changed the landscape and introduced a lot of new people, but it's also, I think, pushing a lot of decisions outside of some of the genre fictions that are really driving the TikTok conversation. What is history going to look like in 5 years? What is business going to look like in 5 years? What are the core commercial authors where the name is bigger than the title? What are they going to look like? So it's a really interesting time to be in publishing and book selling and to kind of work with publishers on this trend, but also this kind of new normal around these groups of readers that are really important to the business.
How fascinating, huh? That TikTok, the app that has, fostered the least attention span in all of us, is actually the one that is boosting books once again. However, in terms of the content, some users say that BookTok tends to promote a very specific genre and that can be limiting and even a little bit dangerous. Take a look.
With the cat and mouse duet, which is Haunting and Hunting Adeline. If you guys have never heard of it, skip forward in this video because you should keep going on with your life, not knowing what those books are about. I have never been more disturbed by a piece of fiction than when I read like 40% of that book, and it has unfortunately never left my brain after that. I feel like there is a line because listen, I have read dark romance before. I literally have a dark romance shelf. I feel like as long as we are going in with the lens that this is fictional and to not romanticize it, but then you have the argument that within reading the fiction itself, you're romanticizing it in a way.
Ashling, do you agree? Do you think BookTok actually glamorizes, violence?
I think it's difficult to say because obviously media is very diverse and the kind of books that are on BookTok are very diverse and very different in what they address. I do think there are some books that are on BookTok that are being promoted on BookTok to readers that are not maybe coming with the warnings that they should be coming with. So, for example, Haunting Adeline, I've seen that promoted as just like, ooh, quirky little romance with some dark elements. And then obviously when you go in to read the book, it's actually really, really dark. It really deserves, it really deserves like a thought before you approach it. And maybe if people were caveating their recommendations of that book a little bit better, it wouldn't be such a problem. I don't think overall, though, TikTok promotes kind of problematic books. I think it's just there are some notable exceptions. And of course, there's a lot of conversation about them.
Andy, is there an issue here, perhaps, and maybe TikTok should take more responsibility in terms of perhaps moderating the content a little better?
I think to an extent, because at the end of the day, there's always going to be a readership for certain types of books. But I think the minute we start monitoring which books should or shouldn't be discussed, it can get quite dangerous. It can turn into a slippery slope. I do think that there is a responsibility needing to be held, especially by TikTok, to make sure that their users are being held responsible, because BookTok has so many creators from so many different ages, including young people. And we don't want to be inaccurately marketing books that aren't appropriate for their age range. But I don't think that's the responsibility of BookTok creators to an extent. I also believe it's the responsibility of the parents and of the individual themselves to make sure that they are aware of what they're watching, and that there might be, I think it might benefit from like an age rating potentially on certain type of books, but that's something that us as creators need to make sure that we're doing so that we're not portraying anything inappropriately.
And obviously that's part of a bigger debate about the responsibility of these platforms in terms of the content they share. But Shannon, how much of BookTok trends and viral videos do you, as a bookseller, take into consideration for your own marketing strategy?
We look across the board when we're looking at marketing, and a lot of it is influenced by our individual stores and our booksellers when they're, really getting behind a book or doing something with a trend. That kind of, layers into the discussion of everything else that we look at when we look at a book. And I do want to address the elephant in the room that a lot of the fiction that we're talking about and a lot of, these kind of core books have a very strong female demographic and are written with women in mind. And I think when we start to kind of demonize that there is a readership for some of these audience, no matter, where they live or who they talk to or what they're looking for, there's an audience, and to tell them that they're not welcome in a certain place, or to try and kind of change that content, I think is a losing race, because fiction and content can be so many things to so many people. Just like a bookstore, you can explore and, physically walk into different locations whenever you want. To moderate in a different way, there is something on the user and there's something on the parents that I think I agree with Andy has to be there. But we can't start deciding what's right for people and when of a certain age. So if you look at any forms of media or rating systems with movies or things like that, it's all, always a conversation. But I think Book Talk has become this like, oh my God, the great American novel is dead because, books about romance is working. And it's just changed the complexion of the publishing business. And it's asking questions about what are the exciting things we can do everywhere else too? Like, why not have both? So I think it's a good conversation to have, and it's important for publishers to think about, but it can't define, what we publish and when, and what creators do and when.
And what is so interesting about Book Talk is that it may expose you to new content, and just like in the rest of the internet, you are your own curator. Remember the algorithm? Take a look at this.
Following diverse creators, by that I mean people of different backgrounds and identities who read all different types of books, has given me a new perspective on some genres that I'd kind of written off, like spicy romance and horror, because I'd had bad experiences with them before joining Book Talk. But to say that all Book Talk books are generic is simply untrue, and we know what types of books you're talking about. Reading literary books or historical fiction does not make you a better or smarter reader than if you're reading, say, monster smut. Anyways, Book Talk is an onion, it has many layers, and if you're unsatisfied with your feed, then that's a you problem. Try harder.
Ashling, have you been able to discover new things on Book Talk and curate that space?
Absolutely, yes. I don't tend to kind of like the books that are popular on TikTok. And obviously, I respect the fact that they are popular. There is a readership for them. I have definitely found myself discovering more diverse fiction, more nonfiction than I probably would have otherwise, because it's very nice to see other creators that I follow recommend books that I didn't even know existed, or I wouldn't think to approach. So, for example, somebody recommended David Graeber's Debt to me on TikTok. And it's a book that I would have never approached otherwise, because it's like a brick of an economic history. And I was fascinated by it. I really loved it. I ended up recommending it to other people. Other people loved it. And it was just such a great moment of like, I can't believe I found this book. And I'm so glad that I did.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it does teach us something, right? In terms of, I guess there's something for everyone over there.
Exactly, yeah. There is certain genres of books that are overly popular on TikTok, and I do think the conversation about them does start wandering into like, oh, it's all romance, or it's all romantasy. Are people too escapist? Are they not really reading great literature? And as Shannon mentioned previously, like it does risk kind of going into the territory of, are we criticizing what young women read? Are we so focused on this because it's being consumed by young people, or is it genuinely something to watch out for?
And that's a very important question. Andy, your take on this whole debate on whether Book Talk is actually ruining literature, because, I mean, it's indeed certain popular books from the likes of Sarah J. Maas and Colin Hoover are everywhere. What has your experience been, not only as a content creator, but also now as a writer?
I think that we cannot deny the impact that Book Talk has had on people's reading preferences. I know that from what I see, the algorithm will always push videos that they think you will like based on previous videos that you have engaged with. So for that reason, if you're liking a lot of videos around one genre, let's say romance or dark romance, then they'll continue to push those videos, which is perfect because you're continuing to be exposed to more videos recommending books that you know you're going to like. But I also think it's worthwhile considering other genres. But when we think of Book Talk, we think of it as a big collective, and we don't often realize that there are subdivisions within it. When we think of Film Talk, where people discuss movies, we don't just group that all together, because we know that everyone has different preferences for different genres in film. And I feel like people don't do that as much with Book Talk. They see it as one big entity, but there are different subdivisions of Book Talk. There is focusing on fantasy, there's focusing on historical literature. I think that Book Talk is so incredible for so many different groups of people, for writers to promote stories, for indie writers, and also for writers that are traditionally published, for publishers to connect with their readers, and also for readers to share their preferences. So I don't think it's ruining literature. I think it's making it more accessible. And for that reason, we need to make sure that we're just engaging with it critically, but also just having fun. Reading is meant to be a fun activity, and not everyone wants to read critically, and that's absolutely fine. Sometimes you just want to read a fun book, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So I think Book Talk's only exposed more people to literature, which is a fantastic thing.
Sometimes you do just want to escape. A reader and a content creator, Taylor Rosen, has posted this video about how sometimes knowing too much about a fun thing can actually, like reading, can kill the joy. Take a look.
I over-research everything. I spend way too many hours researching which shower curtain liner to get. Made me think about the last time I just went into a bookstore and picked out what I thought looked interesting. And it's like no room for discovery anymore. That's how I kind of got back into reading, was like walking into a bookstore, seeing a Murakami book and saying, who is this guy? This looks weird and interesting. And then feeling a little more deeply connected because it felt like I discovered it for myself. And so we're like robbing ourselves of these experiences because we're over-researching.
Ashling, your thoughts on trying to control the experience too much there?
In terms of research?
Yes.
I definitely think that like part of enjoying a good book is discovering what it has to offer. So probably if you go into it knowing too much, you won't enjoy it as much as you would have otherwise. I do understand why people want to over-research. And as for me as a reader, for example, it feels sometimes as if there's so many books that it's pointless to even try and like wade through the pile to find something. It feels like, you know, there's hundreds and thousands of new stories out there and hundreds of thousands of old stories that are equally as good. And so I have, like that creator, fallen into a research hole before, trying to figure out like, what should I spend my limited time on now, instead of, you know, researching it organically.
Yeah, and that can be applied to every aspect of life, indeed. I want to get one more point across before we move into the future of this industry, because Book Talk is a huge community of readers and of industry professionals. Many users now give advice on how to promote their books on TikTok as well. Take a look.
What makes you tick as a creative, but also why you created what you create, why you wrote your book and wanted it to be out in the world.
So you're going to need to do a lot more videos than you thought. Once people have figured out that you exist, now they're going to be making a decision as to whether they're going to follow.
If there's one thing that connects book lovers, it is sharing what you're reading, what's on your to-be read list, that kind of thing. And a bonus to this is if you read a lot of books that are within the genre that you write about, you're going to be connecting to the people who are going to be interested in your book as well.
Shannon, Andy mentioned this before, saying that it has made it perhaps easier for certain authors to talk about their work. Would you say that Book Talk has made it cheaper as well for people to promote their content?
I don't know if it's cheaper. I just think book marketing has changed. And I think book reviews and print media and, you know, the way that books were marketed in the past have been kind of evolving. And Book Talk is just, as we've mentioned before, a more accessible way to be discovered. I think it's important to remember TikTok is trying to keep you on the app. So it is feeding you a lot of likeness and sameness, and that discovery, whether it be from a different type of publisher's approach to marketing or, you know, doing book stops and stopping in bookstores and kind of creating that type of buzz is also a way. So I know this is a Book Talk conversation and it's anchored in Book Talk creators and authors and kind of the discussion around publishing with it. But it's definitely, I think, not the only thing that's working in book selling or the book world right now. It's influencing a lot of those things, but it's kind of, you know, taking a lot of air out of the room because TikTok and book talk has been such a massive conversation in the last 4 years because it's gotten so many people involved and it's changed the landscape and have pushed publishers to be much more nimble and go with paperbacks because they're much more accessible, thank goodness. But it's very important to remember, you know, book talk is not the end all be all in reading or discovering or meeting people.
And it's important that you bring that up because I want to end the show today with your thoughts on what the future holds for reading. We've been talking about how much of this experience has changed over the decades. What do you think, Shannon, will be the future of reading to all of us?
I'm excited because I think we're at a place where I've seen more readers of different walks of life in our stores than I have in the last 15 years, just in the last 2 years. And people coming back and meeting each other through the books has allowed a lot more niche and a lot of our backlist assortment and a lot of discoveries like The Debt and, you know, some kind of amazing backlist titles that have started to bubble because people are coming in and discovering great things. I think this is kind of like a step 2 in an evolution of what reading could look like. And I think books are going to continue to be more accessible and hopefully quicker to market. But books are inherently a piece of someone's soul. They work so long on books. So to have it be a flash in the pan of a 30-second video is not doing enough work for the piece of art that we get to sell every day as booksellers. So it's exciting to be in this time where there's something that, you know, shows that publishing can be flexible in no matter what form it takes. And as a bookseller, that's exciting because it means everyone who's reading now and everyone who's older who's reading now is just going to continue to want to find more, meet more people who are fellow readers, discover different things they may not have known. And, you know, that's all a bookseller wants is to just have those that opportunity for recommendation of all the things that are in our brains that we're like, but here's 6 other books that you could also try. So I'm excited for the way that publishing is moving.
Is evolving. Andy, your thoughts on this? Because we talk a lot about how social media becomes even ever more visual and perhaps there's no need to read in the future. Do you think that that is wrong?
Yeah, I think people are always going to want to read. I think reading does something for the soul. I think it just allows you to walk 1,000 lifetimes, all from the comfort of your own room sometimes. I think there's no greater feeling for me than walking into a bookstore. And even before I became an author, but walking into a bookstore and realizing that every one of these books has been written over sometimes many months and many years by creators and that they're loved by someone. So I adore the reading community and the act of reading itself as well. And I feel like any platform that promotes this, in essence, at its core, is a good thing. Of course, there are always going to be subdivisions that engage in it in a way that you may not potentially agree with. But of course, in real life, there's going to be people that have opinions that you don't necessarily agree with. But
absolutely.
I'm really excited about sharing the love for reading with as many people as possible, encouraging people to go to the bookstores, to engage with booksellers, and to just discuss their love for reading and to share it as widely as possible for people of all ages.
Ashling, your thoughts on the future of reading? Are you excited as well?
I'm really looking forward to seeing how things develop. It feels like, for me, specifically since 2020, because I think that's when book talk really exploded, it feels like everybody's reading, and maybe to a greater degree than they were reading before, certainly more visibly than they were reading before. And as someone who's read my whole life, but, you know, in my teenage period went through this whole like, oh, I'm a nerd, I mustn't show anyone that I'm reading. It has felt very gratifying to be able to do so publicly and with so much joy, and to have people and like my friends who perhaps wouldn't consider themselves readers approach this and be like, I've gotten into this book, I really like it. Yeah, I'm just very, very excited to see where this community will go.
Ashling, Shannon, and Andy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being part of the stream today. And thank you all for tuning in. Keep the conversation going online. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream and stay in touch with us. Take care, and I'll see you soon.